The winter evening settled over the Montana mining operation with that particular stillness. That comes just before dark. Thomas Calloway stood beside his old pickup truck, one hand resting gently on his daughter Lily's shoulder. She was 6 years old, bundled against the cold in a pink quilted jacket that had seen better days, her dark hair tucked under a knit cap. Thomas was 42, though the years had carved themselves into his face with particular clarity. He had kind eyes that crinkled at the corners, a beard flecked with gray, and the weathered hands of a man who'd worked with machines all his life. Those hands bore scars and calluses, each one a story of engines repaired, problems solved, small miracles performed in dim garages and dusty workshops. The Caterpillar 797F mining truck towered above them like a cathedral made of steel and rubber. Its massive yellow frame caught the last rays of sunlight, and even sitting silent and broken, it commanded respect. This was one of the largest trucks in the world, with tires taller than a grown man and an engine that could power a small neighborhood. A black sedan pulled up, and from it emerged Catherine Reynolds. She was in her mid-40s, dressed in a burgundy coat that spoke of boardroom meetings and difficult decisions. Her blonde hair was pulled back neatly, and she moved with the quiet confidence of someone who'd earned her position through years of careful work. She was the operations director for Summit Mining, and this silent giant represented a problem that was costing her company dearly. 3 engineers stood nearby, their expressions a mixture of frustration and exhaustion. They'd been trying to resurrect this machine for nearly a month. "Mr. Calloway?" Catherine's voice carried across the cold air, professional but with an undertone of something that might have been hope. "Yes, ma'am," Thomas replied softly, his voice the kind that never needed to be raised to be heard. Catherine approached them, her breath making small clouds in the freezing air. She glanced down at Lily, and for just a moment, her businesslike composure softened. "Thank you for coming out here," she said. "I'll be straightforward with you. We've had specialists fly in from 3 states. We've had Caterpillar's own engineers spend weeks on this machine. Nobody can figure out what's wrong. The electronics are acting erratically. The engine won't maintain proper operation, and we're losing $20,000 every single day this truck sits idle." Thomas listened quietly, his hand still resting protectively on Lily's shoulder. The little girl leaned against her father, tired from the long day, but patient in the way children learn to be when their parent is all they have. "I understand you used to be the head mechanic at the Clearwater mine," Catherine continued. "That you had a gift for understanding these big machines." "That was some years back," Thomas said gently, "before my wife Sarah passed. Before I needed to find work that let me be home for Lily every evening." Catherine nodded, understanding flickering across her face. "I know you're working at Anderson's Auto Repair now, making what, $16 an hour? Mr. Calloway, I'm prepared to pay you $100,000 if you can get this truck running properly within the next 2 days." The number hung in the cold air between them. Thomas felt Lily's small hand slip into his, squeezing tight. Even at 6, she understood that was more money than they'd ever had. That's a considerable amount," Thomas said slowly, his voice measured. "It's less than a week's downtime," Catherine replied, "and frankly, I'm running out of options. I've heard stories about you. Mr. Calloway, they say you don't just fix machines. You understand them." Thomas looked down at his daughter. Lily gazed up at him with those wise eyes, so much like her mother's, full of trust and love. "Daddy's really good at fixing things," Lily said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. A gentle smile crossed Thomas's face, the kind reserved only for his little girl. "Well, sweetheart, I suppose we can take a look." Catherine gestured toward the engineers. "They've documented everything they've tried. You'll have access to whatever you need. But I should be clear, Mr. Calloway, if you can't fix it, I can't pay. We've already invested $40,000 in specialists with nothing to show for it." "I understand," Thomas said. "I need to ask something, though. Would it be all right if Lily stays with me while I work? I can't afford childcare right now, but I promise she'll be safe. She's used to waiting while I work." "Of course," Catherine said, and this time there was unmistakable warmth in her voice. "There's a supervisor's office with a comfortable couch, heat, snacks. She can do homework there or rest, whatever she needs." Lily smiled up at the kind lady, and Catherine smiled back, something genuine and unguarded passing between them. That first evening, Thomas studied all the documentation while Lily sat nearby in the warm office, coloring pictures and occasionally looking up to wave at her father through the window. The engineers had been thorough, Thomas could see that. But they'd been treating symptoms rather than searching for the source. Around 10 o'clock, Thomas gathered up his daughter, who'd fallen asleep with her crayons still scattered around her. He lifted her gently, feeling how light she was, how completely she trusted him. Walking to his truck through the cold night air, he felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders like an old, familiar coat. The next morning came early. After dropping Lily at school with a promise and a hug, Thomas returned to the silent giant waiting for him. He didn't start with the computer systems or the electrical diagnostics. Instead, he did what had always served him best. He climbed into the enormous engine compartment and simply listened. He placed his hand on the cold metal, feeling the stillness where there should have been power and life. Then, methodically, patiently, he began to trace every system, every connection, every component, with the kind of attention that doesn't rush because it knows hurrying creates mistakes. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the frozen ground slightly. Other workers arrived and went about their business, occasionally glancing at the man who seemed to be having a quiet conversation with a machine. Around midday, Catherine appeared. She'd traded her elegant coat for a company jacket, though she still carried that same quiet authority. "Any progress?" she asked, unable to completely hide the hope in her voice. Thomas emerged from the engine compartment, his face smudged with grease, his hands dark with oil. "I believe so," he said calmly. All those specialists were looking at this as a computer problem. They kept trying to reprogram systems, recalibrate sensors. But the real issue is simpler than that. Simpler? Thomas pointed to a junction box near the engine block. Someone modified this truck years ago, added an auxiliary power system. They did the work quickly, didn't protect the wiring properly. Over time, with all the vibration and temperature changes these machines endure, the insulation wore through. You've got a short that's sending false signals throughout the entire electrical system. Catherine stared at the small box. "That's it? 3 engineering teams missed that? Sometimes we look so hard for complicated answers that we miss the simple ones," Thomas said with a gentle smile. "But it's not a quick repair. I need to rewire that entire section and check for any damage the bad signals might have caused. It'll take me through tonight and into tomorrow." "Whatever you need," Catherine said immediately. "Take your time and do it right." That afternoon, when Thomas picked up Lily from school, she could see something different in her father's eyes. As they drove back to the mine site, stopping for hamburgers along the way, a rare treat that made Lily's whole face light up, he explained. What he'd found in terms she could understand. "So it's like when my nightlight doesn't work because the cord is broken inside?" Lily asked. "Exactly like that, sweetheart," Thomas said. "Sometimes the biggest problems have the smallest causes." They ate their dinner in the truck as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Thomas watched his daughter's happy face and felt something stir in his chest that he'd thought had died with Sarah, a sense that maybe life still held good things ahead. That night, Thomas worked under bright lights that pushed back the darkness. Lily dozed in the office, wrapped in Thomas's spare jacket, occasionally waking to check on her father. Each time, she'd see him bent over his work, those patient hands performing surgery on a machine that weighed more than 100 cars. Catherine stayed, too, working in her office but frequently looking out to where Thomas labored. There was something about watching this quiet man work with such care and dedication that reminded her of things she'd forgotten about how the most valuable qualities in a person can't be measured on a spreadsheet. Near 2 in the morning, Thomas finished. He climbed into the massive cab, said a quiet prayer, and turned the key. The engine rumbled to life with a deep, satisfying sound. Every gauge read normal. Every system responded perfectly. No warning lights, no errors. Just the smooth, powerful operation of a machine finally working as it was meant to. Thomas shut it down and started it again. Perfect. He ran every diagnostic, every check. Everything responded exactly right. When he climbed down, Catherine was standing there, her face showing the relief of someone who'd been carrying an unbearable weight. "It works," Thomas said simply. Catherine closed her eyes for a moment, Test it fully tomorrow with a load. But Mr. Calloway, I think you've just earned that $100,000. The next day, with Lily watching from a safe distance, Thomas took the great machine on its test run. It performed beautifully, like the gentle giant it had always been meant to be, moving tons of earth with grace and power. When he climbed down for the last time, Catherine was waiting with a check. But she had something else in her hand, too. Mr. Calloway, she said, we need a senior equipment specialist. The position pays $90,000 a year, full benefits including health insurance for you and Lily, and regular hours. You'd be home for dinner almost every night. I'd like to offer it to you. Thomas looked at the check, then at Lily running toward him, her pink jacket bright against the industrial landscape. He thought about all the nights he'd worried, all the times he'd wondered if he was failing as a father, if he could ever give his daughter the life she deserved. Yes, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Yes, I'd be grateful for the opportunity. Lily reached him and he swept her up, holding her close. Catherine smiled, a real smile that transformed her entire face. You know what solved this problem? Catherine said. It wasn't expensive equipment or advanced technology. It was someone who took time to really listen, to look at things clearly and honestly. That's rarer than you might think. 6 months later, Thomas and Lily had moved into a better apartment. Lily had her own room, decorated with stars on the ceiling that glowed at night. They had health insurance, security, and most importantly, time together. But something else had changed too. Catherine had started stopping by the maintenance shop regularly, conversations that began about equipment but drifted into talk about life, about loss, about second chances. She'd told him about losing her husband years ago, about burying herself in work and perhaps losing sight of what truly mattered. One Sunday afternoon, Thomas and Lily were at the park when Catherine happened by. Lily waved her over with the unself-conscious friendliness of childhood, and Catherine joined them on the bench. And somehow it felt natural and right. As they watched Lily play on the swings, her laughter carrying on the spring breeze, Thomas realized that fixing broken things wasn't just about machines. It was about accepting help when offered, about recognizing that our value isn't in what we earn but in how we treat others, and about understanding that sometimes the best things in life come when we're simply doing our honest best. The Caterpillar 797F still runs in that Montana mine, strong and reliable. But the real story isn't about a machine that was repaired. It's about a father who never stopped trying, a woman who remembered what truly matters, and a little girl who believed in her daddy even when things seemed impossible. Sometimes the answer is simpler than we think. Sometimes all it takes is patience, honesty, and faith that tomorrow can be better. That's a truth worth holding on to at any age, in any season of life.